I don't have much to say today, but I don't know.
How's the teeth coming in?
Good.
You show them? Yeah, you can see the little white nubbies there you go. Yep. Does it feel weird not having teeth?
No, it
No.
only felt weird when there's still blood all over
Well,
it.
yeah, that would be pretty weird.
And
So,
it did not taste very good.
yeah, I bet it didn't. So, you want to say bye?
Bye. One thing I also want to tell you, I've got three new teeth that I have three teeth that need to come out. One's on the top right, one's on the bottom left, and one's on the right.
So why
Which
don't
like the
you pull them?
this one is actually the one that wants to come out.
Then why don't you pull them?
Actually, this one's actually been the one that's been saying that for years.
Okay.
Now, this one is actually the one that is the newest.
Mm-hmm.
This one I just noticed when I lost my two teeth, which they need dinner then.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, baby. Love you.
I love you, Daddy.
Good night. Close the door, okay? Welcome back. As you can see, she still has no two front teeth. And she probably has about, gosh, another dozen or so that are actually in there that need to actually come out, but she absolutely refuses to take them out. So, yeah, she needs to get more teeth out. So, but anyway, so today we're going to be doing 1 Samuel 27. It's a really short paragraph, and I kind of intended to probably get 2 chapters out, but when I kind of came across the chapter, it's such a monumental chapter in the book that I felt that it probably deserved uh, its own just focus. And so we're going to talk about that today, kind of what happened, why it happened, and really kind of break down kind of the issues and some of the issues that I think apply to us, especially kind of in the modern era. So it's only 12 verses, but we're going to go through the whole thing right now. But David thought to himself, one of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. So David and the 600 men with him left and went over to Achish, son of Maoch, king of Gath. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Each man had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of your country towns, so that I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you?" So on that day Achish gave him Ziklag, and it has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. David lived in Philistine territory a year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Gizrites, and the Amalekites. From ancient times these people had lived in the land extending to Shur and Egypt. Whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkeys and camels and clothes. Then he returned to Achish. When Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" David would say, "Against the Negev of Judah, or against the Negev of Jeremiah, or against the Negev of the Kenites." He did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform on us and say, "This is what David did." And such was his practice as long as he lived in Philistine territory. Achish trusted David and said to himself, "He has become so obnoxious to his people, to the Israelites, that he will be my servant for life." And so the reason it's such a short chapter, but the reason I just want to stop and give time is this is such a monumental occurrence. Until I actually read this, I did not remember this about this period in the reading, and so I was really like this really took me by surprise, and so I really want to talk about it because he literally goes over to the people that he's been fighting for years and years. Um, and so this is something that just is kind of crazy. And so, let's talk first about, the build up to this and what happens here. So, if we go back to the beginning here, to the beginning of the story of David, David is selected by Samuel after Saul has fallen from grace, showing lack of faith with God. and he's sort of prophesied anointed to be king by Samuel. So and he knows this, and Saul knows this, or at least Saul is fearful of it. And so what we see is Saul will during this whole period of time will continually chase after David. He's jealous, he's afraid, he's worried. He just doesn't know what to do, and so we see David continually being uh, fleeing Saul. Um, and what we see here is we see a time where David's continually uh, David's being continually chased and under the threat of death to Saul. And I've had a lot of stressful points in my life, but I can't say that I've actually ever had a point where I felt like someone was chasing me to kill me. And so what we see is we see in the last several chapters here, we see a person who is just being continually chased by Saul and is just really really struggling. Give me just a minute. There's a light on that's there. There we go. Okay, there was a light on that was actually starting to really annoy me there. Um, and so we see David just really struggling during this period of time, and he is, I frankly at this point to me he sounds kind of fed up. He's in a desert. He's hungry. He's starving. He's under probably a constant worry of death, and not just death of him, but his followers and his family. And what we see here is he's finally at the end of his chain, and he goes, "You know what? I'm done. I'm out of here. I don't care. I don't care if I'm promised to be the king of Israel. I'm not staying here for Saul to get me." And so we see a person that at this point takes a very rash step and a very unfaithful step. Because remember, he knows that he's to be the king of Israel, and he knows that this has been promised to him by God. And so leaving to go to the Philistines almost sounds like a full-fledged lack of faith of David in this moment. And so we see him make a very rash, very dumb mistake, and a very monumentous mistake. Because something that I think we should remember in ancient times is it was very common if you fled your country for some reason as king, it was equivalent to, unless you had the permission of most of the great people at the time, the other lords and the other lords. Um, if you just fled your country, generally your crown was considered forfeit. And so, in some ways, this is like David forfeiting the crown of Israel, which is actually one of the reasons, according to one of the studies I read, one of the reasons why Saul doesn't pursue him. It's not because he went over to the Philistine and the enemies, although that may be one of the reasons. But the other reason is because once he fled to the Philistines, who had been the enemy of Israel, Saul's answer is the people here will never trust him again, so he's never going to be king. He just forfeited his right, and so Saul no longer looks for him. And so, what we see here is, in some ways, we see David pretty much give up his opportunity to the crown. Now we know that in the end he'll be restored, but at least at the present time, at this moment in time, I do wonder if David didn't feel like at this point he gave up or he was giving up and just said, "I'm done with it. I can't do this any longer." And he sees no other way than getting out and going to the enemy, literally the enemy, um, who he's been himself fighting for years and years. And so what are we to take by this? Because it looks rash, it looks horribly rash, and it looks horribly unfaithful to God. Um, how can we take this lesson and learn from it, and what it kind of came to? And maybe this is just striking home for me personally because we're so busy right now with a newborn. But to me, I've never been on the run for my life like a fugitive, but my life has been on the run a lot at various points in time. And I think really here in America, more than a lot of other countries, we live a life very much on the run. We go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and I don't think any of us give ourselves the amount of proper time to stop and breathe and relax, and take a breath, and take inventory of where we are. I think instead we're just bam, 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 uh, moving all of the time. I know I feel like that a lot. I know I feel like that a lot right now, especially with a newborn, because that adds a whole nother level of craziness and busyness to what you're doing. And so, why do we do this? First off, why do we do this in our lives? There's a couple of reasons that we got to watch out for. The first one is we kind of continually add more work to our own plates. We do this for several reasons. One of them might be it's just better if I do it myself mentality. I'm guilty of that one a lot. I was that kid that, you always wanted in a group setting in school because I would just do most of the work because I didn't really want to give it to somebody else. A lot of people I've seen in the past, this one I think is less me because I really don't want to do more work. But there's a lot of people who find that their volume of work is a sort of a level of their prestige. So they want more work to make themselves feel more important, feel more powerful, more needed. So sometimes our busyness is a sign of us trying to make ourselves feel important in a way that we don't need to, because in God's eyes we're important, and frankly, in each Christian should look at each other human in our life as important. And so sometimes we do this because we just we feel like it's a need to feel important. Um, and sometimes we do it because, especially if it's people we respect or we love or family members, when they ask us to do something, we almost can't. We feel guilty to say no. Someone's coming to us to ask for something, we feel like we should, and that's another place where we can kind of get ourselves uh, there. It's sometimes things that feels like it's literally just kind of thrown upon you that you don't really get a choice. That happens a lot of times in people's work. People go to a job for a certain thing, and then more things get thrown on them. Some are literally birthed. Like for example, our business is literally from the birth of a child. Um, and so sometimes there's times where it's out of your control. And so there's a lot of reasons. These are some of them that we have to kind of watch for. Some of them we can control, some of them we can't. And the ones we should control, we should try and monitor. Um, Now, let's say we do have too much work. What are we to do? There's a really good book. It's a children's book that Ava likes, and that I grew up with, called The Bernstein Bears and Too Much Pressure. And the whole story is actually about the Bear family. The kids in particular start doing every after school activity there is. So one starts with baseball, the other starts with ballet, then one does horseback riding, and well, then the other one wants to do horseback riding. Then one's doing computer club, then art club, then swimming, and they get so many that they have this gigantic calendar, and there's literally something in every time slot in every day, until the point where it just becomes overwhelming, and then they all have to sit down. They have to say, okay, what's our real priorities? What are the things we're going to choose to prioritize in our lives versus the others? And so that's sometimes I think if we're all feeling overwhelmed, if we feel like we're always on the run, like David did, but just not on our lives, just always on the run. There's a couple things we can do. First off, we have to acknowledge a couple things, a couple hard facts. One, other people can do things, and they can do them just as well or better than you can. Um, we should also acknowledge that doing less doesn't mean that we are lazy. It just means that our bodies can't take on every single thing that it wants to do. Um, you then also got to remind yourself that that amount of get up and go has a very limited shelf life. And during the time that you're doing it, your mental and emotional well being is not being taken care of, and it will only get worse. And sometimes you got to remember that for you to do the most important things in your life, for you to do the things that are most critical, the things that are the top priorities, you have to be mentally, emotionally taken care of. You have to be in a good mind frame. You have to be in a good physical standpoint to be able to do these things. And so if if you're not taking care of yourself and giving yourself time, you have to actually step back and say, I need some time so I can do all the other good things. And so some of these things, the less important ones that take up time that are less important, we got to set them aside. We got to let someone else do them, and we got to take care of ourselves. Think of what they tell you. If you've ever been on an airplane, they give you the safety spill. And they always say that if the cabin depressurizes, oxygen mask will come out. And they always tell you this: if you have children, take care of yours first, and then take care of your kids. Because if you try and take care of your kids first and then yours, if you pass out before you get your kids on, you're both in trouble. But if you get yours on faster and then get your kids, you're both being taken care of. And in a lot of ways, when we talk about prioritizing and making sure to take care of our mental and emotional health, making sure to manage our time for ourselves and for our family, we got to make sure sometimes that we give enough time for ourselves, that we give ourselves some me time, some time to focus on ourselves, because we got to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of anything else and anyone else. It's absolutely critical. And so again, this is a short one, but I feel like it was really critical, and it really spoke to me probably because I do feel like I'm on the run. Work has been busy, having a baby's been busy, church has been busy, everything's been very busy. It all kind of happens every year. There's a part of the year that's always very busy for us, and this has been the time. And so this is one of those areas where feeling on the run myself, especially with a child in his infancy, this one really spoke to me that maybe we should talk about living a life on the run, living a life that's continuously doing something, and how to manage it, and how to take care of it, and take a moment and breathe and work through it. Um, you're only as good as you allow yourself to be, and part of that is making sure that you have enough time for yourself to really enjoy life. Um, you know, there's times where I feel like, especially as we get older and older, one of my biggest fears is being so busy that when I get near the end of my life and I know I'm about to leave this earth, I always have this fear that I'm going to look back and go, man, that went way faster than it should have. And the reason it went way faster than it should have is because I was literally busy all my life. I don't want that for myself, and I don't want that for you or for anyone else. So make sure, if you're living a life on the run, take some time to stop, reflect, make sure you're taking care of yourself, and make sure to set a priority with the things that are the most important in life. Um, Time is our most valuable commodity. You can always earn more money. You can always find more friends. You can always get more things in this world. The one thing that none of us on this earth have control of is getting back even 1 second of time that's already passed. And so I just implore you to make sure that you're using your time the right way. Give yourself a little bit. It's okay to be a little lazy sometimes, or at least maybe I should put it a different way. It's okay at times to take some time for yourself to enjoy something. This life is meant to be enjoyed a little bit. Enjoy it. Work on your mental health. Work on the things that make you happy, and still do things. To be clear, I'm not saying shirk off everything that you do, but make sure your priorities are set completely in place. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for getting us into spring, because I love spring. I think it's one of the best seasons. It's not too hot. Everything's beautiful and green, and it's just I like the early mornings. I like the late nights where it's nice and sunny, um, but not too hot yet. Thank you for this time. Father, there's a lot of times where I think we go on the run all the time, and frankly, all of us at some point are going to say, you know what, I've had it, and we're going to walk away from something. We're going to do something rash. We're going to do something that's we shouldn't have done, and we're going to regret doing it the way that I'm sure David regrets going over to Gath um, at this moment of weakness in his life. If we're living on the run, if we're running and living 100 miles an hour or more, help us to make sure to take an inventory, slow ourselves down, make sure it takes time for ourselves, make sure that we take time for you, and just don't overwhelm ourselves. I think we take for granted how important it is to have a good mental bearing on ourselves, and help us to remember how important that is to be emotionally, mentally there, and just not to be overwhelmed. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thank you guys. By way of announcements, just remember we are always live online, 10:45 in the morning on Sundays. You're always more than welcome to in person. We're still practicing social distancing. We're still doing all of the things that we so want to do to protect each other, even though there's so many more vaccinations out there than there has been. We will be back here again next Sunday at 6 p.m. So always please feel free to come back. If you can't watch us live, you can always come at any time to watch us and to see us on here. So I hope everyone has a great evening. We will see you again soon, and I hope you have a great week.